Beyond the Shadows, and this week is going to be great. We are going into the Missouri State Penitentiary right here in Jefferson City. Now, if you can imagine, when Davy Crockett was swinging his Kentucky long rifle and fighting Mexicans at the Alamo, there were already prisoners behind these walls. Imagine the suffering they went through back then. Imagine the tortures. Imagine the kind of criminal mind that stayed back here. And imagine what we're going to deal with tonight. This is the second time that we've been to this penitentiary to ghost hunt. The first time was awesome. We're bringing in some friends of ours tonight from Kansas, some friends of ours from Missouri. We're going to be here all evening. Here's where I need my Scooby Gang to join up with me tonight. You're going to be right there with me. We are going to be dealing with EVPs. We're going to be dealing with, hopefully, some good orb photography, some rod contact, some K2s. We're going to have the creme de la creme of the ghost world and a show with everything but Yul Brynner. And if you listen to rock and roll in the 80s, you'll gather that reference. If not, get on YouTube, type in One Night in Bangkok. You'll understand what I'm talking about. So tonight, my Scooby Gang's going with me. We're going into commingle with the dead right here at the penitentiary. Get your security blanket, put down your shades, turn down the lights, get ready to stay with me as long as you can. We're still in the Missouri State Penitentiary in Jefferson City, and with me is Mike Lear of Jefferson City Paranormal Investigations, who's been just really great with us tonight and helping us investigate. Aside from the ghosts for a minute, the prison has a hellacious history to it, just an incredible history. We have also gangsters like Pretty Boy Floyd. Was there others?
Pretty Boy Floyd was probably the biggest name that was here among gangsters, and was not a big name at the time he was here. And I've heard alternating accounts, but most seem to indicate that fortunately for him, he didn't have the nickname when he was here. Pretty Boy, not the best name to have in a prison. Probably one of the bigger names after him was actually the man who was convicted of being his getaway driver in the Union Station shootout in Kansas City. And that man was executed here. Adam Ricchetti was executed here in 1938. And Pretty Boy Floyd allegedly even contacted authorities and said, "You got the wrong guy, he wasn't even there." Now, of course, do you take the word of a gangster?
Right.
But there are many who to this day believe that Adam Ricchetti was not guilty of the crime that he was executed for. And then you also have, some of the people that fascinate me are the people who came here after the Civil War. Those of us in Missouri who, of course, remember the guerrilla warfare that took place in Missouri during the Civil War. And one of the most famous guerrilla fighters was, of course, Bloody Bill Anderson. Well, one of Bloody Bill's scouts was a guard here after the war.
Okay.
Okay, and so you can imagine if you're an inmate here and you fought for the Union, how a former Civil War, let alone a former Confederate, let alone one of these guerrillas is now your guard, how you might have been treated.
And he was a brutal man anyway.
Bloody Bill was a brutal man, and so thereby his men had a bloody reputation.
Okay, what about the kidnappers who were executed here?
So, arguably the most famous kidnapping in American history behind the Lindbergh baby.
Okay.
And this happened in 1953, unfolded really very quickly. You had a man that was in one of these cells, maybe not in this building, but he was in this prison in April of 1953. He gets out in April of that year, and his name is Carl Austin Hall. Carl had squandered his inheritance, which was a sizable inheritance for the day, and was reduced to robbing cab drivers. That's what got him in here.
Okay.
Well, when he gets out, he was a drunk, and being a drunk in a bar one day, he meets a woman named Bonnie Hattie. Bonnie was a widower. She had been working as a prostitute. She was also a heavy drinker, and she fell in love with Carl. And he had toyed for years with this idea and decided to go through with it of kidnapping the child of a wealthy family to collect the ransom money, and he thought, okay, well, I'll be set for life once I do that. So he convinces Bonnie to go with him on this plan, and she poses as the aunt of this young Bobby Greenlease. Bobby was a 6-year-old boy, the son of a wealthy Cadillac dealer in Independence. And so posing as his aunt, she convinces the nuns at the Catholic school he's going to let him come with her on the ruse that his mom's had a heart attack and is asking for him, and I need to take him to her. And it just so happened, frankly, that the nuns that were there that day were not the older, wizened, worldly nuns that might have known something didn't smell right about this. And Bobby, unfortunately, was killed in less than an hour after he left that home. But to make a long story short, Carl and Bonnie were in the gas chamber at MSP 81 days after Bobby died. So you think about this story. I mean, even if you go back to April when he's getting out of prison, and then here he is in December of that same year being executed, how quickly this whole thing developed between him meeting Bonnie and convincing her to go through with his plan and carrying out the crime, and then being here and being executed.
Okay. And they were, if I understand right, executed side by side
They were.
at the same time.
Now there are some sources, I'm glad you mentioned that, there's some sources out there that say that was the only double execution in the gas chamber here. It was not, it was the fourth. It was, and there were some that came close to being double executions, that one guy was cleared at the last minute, and so it wasn't. But yes, they were the last pair to be executed in the gas chamber at MSP.
The most famous escapee from this prison would be...
Certainly in the modern era, that would be James Earl Ray. And many people, even as they come on our tours, are surprised to learn that when James Earl Ray shot Martin Luther King in Memphis, Tennessee, and that's debated by some historians whether he actually did,
Right.
but certainly he was convicted of that crime and sent to prison for it. He was an escapee from MSP when he did that. He had escaped from this prison almost a year to the day before Martin Luther King was shot in Memphis.
Tortures, there's been tragedy in this prison. Can you give an overview of maybe why it is so haunted?
Well, and again, as we like to say on the tours, when people ask us if it's haunted, the best that we can tell you is we've had things happen that we can't explain.
Okay.
And of course, now we're getting into paranormal theory of, well, why would there be a haunting if there is one? And those are one of the big questions, and of course, we're always trying to answer in this field, as you know. And whether that be if you subscribe to the theory that someone who dies in a great deal of anguish, or someone who dies unexpectedly, or someone who suffered a great deal of emotional trauma over a period of time, and that leaves a presence behind in and of itself. Well, whether you subscribe to any of those theories or a dozen others I could rattle off, you would have seen all of those circumstances here.
Okay.
And then you also have the physical characteristics of the site. I mean, there are some paranormal theories that suggest that limestone lends itself to the paranormal because it works as a sort of a battery to retain energy. Well, most of the buildings here, certainly the ones that we go in on the tours, are all limestone. There are theories that the presence of water will lend itself to the paranormal, just water in and of itself. We'll add to it the fact that we're right next to the Missouri River, which is running water. And so there you have too a source of energy perhaps. So, and then I've even read theories that suggest that paranormal activity is more likely to happen near railroad tracks. Now,
I've never heard of that one.
I've seen that one posted out there, and of course one thinks, well, that's because we are all the towns that are along the railroad tracks. But suffice to say, if you subscribe to any of those three theories, well, we've got all of those things right here too. So again, there are a lot of ways to look at this and say, it's easy to imagine why there would be activity here. But I think for most of us, if you're not one who subscribes to any theories and you're just plain fascinated by the paranormal, you look for the old creepy abandoned prisons, mental hospitals, etc. Then this certainly falls into that category as well.
I tend to look for the history. Now, what kind of history can you tell us about that occurred even in this building?
Well, this building's probably the best example, if only because it is the oldest building that still stands on the site, and you see evidence in this building more so than any of the others of the old punishment systems that they used to use. And by the time this building is being built in 1868, or completed in 1868, they've gone to a system called the Auburn system that got its name out of the Auburn prison in New York. And this was a very brutal, very harsh punishment system. For as simply as I tell people on my tours, for simply looking at someone in the face, you could be beaten with a cat of nine tails if you didn't get permission first to look at that person and talk to that person. And a cat of nine tails is a very brutal punishment weapon. It was sometimes said that in as few as 8 to 10 lashes with that thing, blood would begin to pool in the person's shoes, the person that was being beaten. So that's some small example of how little tolerance there was under this system. Silent conditions most of the time. You could speak, in later days anyway, you could speak into your buddies at your prison factory job. Well, guess what? That was because we knew that people were more productive if we let them talk while they were at work.
Okay.
And you could talk to your buddies in your cell like we would be standing here tonight until it was lights out. But most of the day when you're out walking around, when you're going to the dining hall and you're sitting there eating lunch, you're in silence. Even the guards don't speak to you. And so you can imagine too then what that does to the psyche after enough time. So these were very brutal punishment systems, and they were phased out over a long period of time. It wasn't that there was this date set and you can't do the cat of nine tails anymore, and you can't do water torture was used here. You know, these things were phased out over time, and oftentimes were replaced with something else that would not always be as brutal, but still would take a great toll on a body that was in here.
Tell us a little more about the dungeons down below.
Okay, so in this building, we still have dungeons, and again, as I always tell my tours, we're not being figurative when we say dungeons. It's exactly what they are, that's what they were made to be. And this was not the only building that had dungeons, it's just the only one that still stands that had dungeons. And men could be locked in there for being incorrigible, they could be locked in there for starting a riot, starting a fire, or again, they could be locked in there because they fought in the Union and their guard was a Confederate. They could be locked in there because they somehow interfered with the prison labor system. You know, there are many times in this prison's operation, as recently as the early 1900s, that it was being leased to businessmen who ran the prison and got to use the inmates then as labor. And so they got to run the prison, not so much as the state running it as we would understand today. And so under those conditions, again, you could be punished just for somehow interfering with the operation of the factories or being bad at your job in the factories. We know of a woman in another building that was locked in an isolation cell because she was bad at sewing. So those are the kinds of conditions you're talking about at different time periods.
And she was starved at that time too.
She was
starved, tortured, and used as slave labor.
You're talking sometimes about depriving them of light. When you're locking them in these dungeons, those were kept cave black.
And how long were people in there?
Sometimes years.
There's two murders that we know of that happened down here. We told you about the one that was during the riot. The other one happened in the law cage. It's over here. The law cage, when you go in here and you go to the right, you're going to see a caged off corner. That had a typewriter in it, and a guy could meet with his lawyer back there and whatnot. Well, back in that corner in 1986, one of the guys that committed a murder over in 4 that I don't know if we told you about. We may have left it out for the sake of not telling you all the, everything like we said before. But that guy and another guy stabbed a man to death 70 times in that cell, stabbed him 70 times. Two versions of one.
Yeah. Is there anyone in here that wants to speak?
Maybe you need bigger hands.
Yeah. Is there anyone in here that wants to speak?
Here, it's usually you sit and listen, you'll hear what sounds like somebody in one of these cells shuffling around, like you'll roll around in bed or something. A couple of voices down here from time to time.
Okay. Say anything you want to say?
You want to know here?
Cat, my sister's just going off like crazy.
Okay.
Am I in the chair that you sat in when you were executed? All right. That was a trick question, right? Okay.
time I got to talk to two spirits. First I want to ask is Tiny Mercer in here with me? Tiny, you still around? Would you rather me call you George? George Mercer, are you still around? Maybe you don't want me to call him Tiny. Mr. Mercer, the last time you was here, you talked to a friend of mine who, yeah, you remember talked about you being strapped down to a gurney rather than in this chair. Is that true?
Going? Do you want us to be here? Keep going. Should we keep going? Yeah. Is where you want us to be? You let us know. Do you want us to point to where you want the rats to go, or keep them the same place if you want us to stay here?
You okay?
Yeah.
Did it subside at all?
No, I think that one were really close. Maybe we should ask them some questions.
Go ahead. Do it.
Did you bring this here for a reason? Are one of these cells yours?
Guess if you died here.
Did you die here? No.
Did something happen right here?
Did they do like the cat tail, cat and nine tail?
But you worked here. Okay. Were you a maintenance person, like a plumber, electrician, handyman?
Yeah.
That's a lot of what happened in those tunnels. Those were steam tunnels, electrical,
And he said he didn't die here.
Okay.
And he wasn't sentenced to die here. He wasn't executed here. It wasn't anything like that.
Is there something else that you were trying to tell us or show us that we haven't gotten to yet?
Going over here.
Do you know something about an inmate?
No.
No.
Okay. Is there something, not a person, not an animal, is there something on the other side of that wall that you want us to know is there? Okay. Is there a person on the other side of that wall that you want us to know is there? Okay. Does what you're trying to tell us have to do with the building that was on this spot before the one that we're in, before Plum Hall? yes or no answers. We could guess all night.
Yeah. It was funny though, they just like chased them all through the hallways just to get here, for him to keep pointing right here.
We just got back from ghost hunting over in hall number 3 and death row section. And I was on one side, we were doing one thing, and Meg and her team had a whole different experience. So what happened over there?
We were over there and we heard some noises down the hall, and then we saw a shadow. It was about 15 feet in front of us. And
Against the wall or in the middle of the hall?
right in the middle of the hallway.
Okay.
And it kept moving away and then coming back, moving away and coming back, as if to indicate to follow it.
Mm-hmm.
So we asked it on the dowsing rods if we were supposed to follow it. He said yes. And then he would get 40 or 50 feet away from us and we'd stop. He'd come back at us. And we followed him around the horseshoe twice.
So you actually went to around the whole thing?
Twice,
Okay.
yes. And then we finally asked him to point with the rods exactly where he wanted us to go. At which point he led us out and onto the other side.
So when you asked that, the rods actually
Moved
to a direction.
point. They
Okay.
moved to the right to indicate, and we'd get to another doorway, and it would point to when we came around to the other side that we had never been in. And we got to a hallway, and kind of a holding area, at which point the K2 meters and everything lit up, and Jackie got a heavy feeling, almost chest pains, at which point we asked if we were supposed to stop. The K2 meter lit up and the rods indicated yes. We spoke to him for several minutes.
Was you still seeing him? Was the shadow still around?
Not at that time.
Okay.
The shadow wasn't there anymore. We followed the shadow all the way to there, and once we got there, the shadow was gone. So then the rods, we kept asking questions and couldn't really get a whole lot of answers. But eventually, we asked if there was something he wanted us to see, that he wanted to show us. And he kept pointing at a spot on the wall behind Jackie,
So the rods would spin.
where rods would spin and point straight at the
Okay.
wall. And actually Jackie, if I was Jackie and she was holding the rods, they would literally turn, both of them, turn back behind
So
her
she was sitting with her back to the
to
wall.
the wall. So we found out that there was an access tunnel,
Mhm.
a steam tunnel, and the person that we were talking to worked in the prison but wasn't a guard, was a maintenance guy, either electrical, plumber, something,
Okay.
and that's primarily where he worked. And we think he was here in the newer building. We don't think he was in the original building. We think he was in the
So,
new one that's still
Hall
standing
number
now.
3 is sitting on the foundation of a former building.
Yes,
Okay. But he was there for hall number 3 as it stands today.
yes.
Did you see the shadow again after that?
We did. All of a sudden, all communication stopped. It was pretty strong, and then it stopped. And then a couple minutes later, we asked if he would come back, and we saw the shadow kind of off to the side,
Mm-hmm.
and then started talking again. He started answering questions again. But then he would make different noises and stuff for us too, just little noises that, out in the hallway. But when we were following him
Mm-hmm.
around, he made all kinds of noises for us, like kind of a, like, come on, I'm waiting for
Uh-huh.
you, stomping kind of sound,
Can
and
you-
Brett shuffling his feet.
Can you describe what you saw exactly?
It was just a black shadow, but it was a figure, and it wasn't a full apparition, but
Okay.
it was a black shadow that was probably, what I saw was probably about 3 feet.
And was it 3 feet off the ground, or was it a man's size with just no legs visible?
It was probably about my height, so
Okay.
5'10" to 6 feet, was at the top, and then about 3 feet down, so it was about 3 feet off the ground. It was almost like we were following his head and shoulders,
Okay.
is what it kind of resembled to me.
Mhm.
But it wasn't an outline, it was just kind of an oval shadow that kept moving and
Cool.
coming back and forth at us. It wasn't scary. He was never trying to be scary, but he wanted us to see things. And at one point we were following him, and the K2 meters lit up, and we looked at the wall. So there's a cage that you can go into to get into the cells,
Right.
or you can walk on the outside of that cage, and we were walking on the outside of that cage. And we turned and we looked, and it looked like there were two sets of eyes. They were glowing. It wasn't obviously human eyes because they don't glow, but it resembled eyes glowing, and we both got the overwhelming feeling that that people were watching us, almost
You
like
and,
Jackie.
okay.
It's almost like we were being paraded, like,
Mhm.
haha, look what I'm able to do.
If I understand, there was a group of 4 of you following this.
There were,
Okay.
no. When this started happening, there were several of us.
Mhm.
And Jackie and I both got this overwhelming feeling at the same time. And if I remember correctly, we kind of looked at each other, and I asked her, I said, did you hear that? She said, yes, it's this way, we're supposed to go this way. So she and I, at first, were just going down this hall.
Mhm.
And so it was just us following this at first, and then people kept following us, because obviously we're passing people as we're going in circles. So then people started following us, but we are the only ones that saw what looked like. So it was a wall, then a cell door, then a wall, then another cell door, and on the walls between the cell doors, about, person height, it looked like there were 2 sets of eyes that were glowing, staring at us. Now, when we went back and looked with flashlights, there were things in the wall for, I guess, bolt heads
Mhm.
in the wall. So the best way that I can describe it is 2 of them were glowing.
Okay.
Something caught those 2. So,
Color? Red, white.
kind of a whitish yellow. It was almost iridescent, like when you see an animal's light,
Mhm.
eyes reflect in the light. So we knew it wasn't human, but with the shadow on the wall and what we were following, it was.
When you went up and found the bolts,
Mhm.
were they rusty? Were they bright galvanized silver? Is there one?
They were painted over.
Painted over,
Mhm.
so they wouldn't be reflecting anything.
No.
Okay. Well, I think we got some video from at least the time you were sitting and talking, and we was getting K2 and Rock
Yes.
action.
Yes.
So we'll check
You
out
all
that
were
video.
in the death row, and you all had an experience with Meg and some of the others. Can you tell me kind of what happened?
Meg and I originally felt like something was wanting us to follow it, and we used the rods, and
Did you see it? Did Meg said she...
we saw it. Meg, when she pointed it out to me, I was like, oh gosh, and then I kept having the feeling that it was there too, and it just like wanted us to follow it. Well, we kept asking it, we followed the rods, we kept following it, and we were going almost around in a circle, but we didn't realize that it actually was taking us around and wanted us to go to the other side. When we got to the other side, we got to a point where there was no cells and it was just pointing to a wall. And we asked it if it was an inmate or anything like that, and nothing was moving. And then Mike had the idea to ask if it was a worker, because there was a tunnel behind there that was for maintenance. And when we asked if it was a worker, it went together. He did not die there or anything like that, but it was just so strong. I got like chest pain and some different feelings, like they were just so strong right there.
Did you ever figure out what it did want?
I
It
think
wanted to show us something,
Okay.
and we could never narrow it down to what exactly it wanted.
But it felt better once he said that he could talk in the audio and explained it to him.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we'll find something on the audio,
You've been through at least 1 and maybe 2 other investigations that I'm familiar with. You're both paramedics, and you're both very experienced. How did you feel chasing this shadow through the hallways?
Well, it didn't only feel like we were chasing him, but it also felt like when we went down one row, like it felt like everybody was watching us.
Mm-hmm.
And Meg said that she felt that way too. Did you feel that way when you?
Oh yeah, I did.
And I think it was Bert that said that he was hearing footsteps behind Meg and I.
Okay.
We were following.
Because we were in the like kind of standoffish behind them, and we noticed them, and then we would hear the shuffling, but it wasn't them, so it's kind of like one big
Yeah.
All right.
It was pretty neat.
Any other experiences over there? Anything that just... Because I know at one point you took off up the steps into another section.
Yeah, I saw something peek over the railing.
Uh-huh.
It was the 3rd floor up. right by the walkway, and I just saw like a shadow peek over the railway, and we went up there, and it felt heavy up there, but then it was just gone.
Okay.
So
your opinion, is this place haunted?
Oh, yes.
yeah,
All right. All right. Thank you very much.
yeah, no problem.
Oh, fuck that.
What was that?
Dude, the whole thing vibrated underneath my feet.
Sounded like something mechanical, but
Should it have vibrated for any reason?
No.
Because it vibrated hard.
There's mechanical equipment down there,
Is it?
but no.
Yeah, that vibrated hard
Now,
too.
if you're walking around,
Whoa,
and
did it
feeling
again?
I just thought I was scared.
that's never. That's to my knowledge, that's a first.
Nobody was walking though. You were standing still, and I was the only person that moved.
Well,
And I
the
didn't
problem is,
move.
this area is off of a boiler room that we're not actually supposed to go in.
oh, I'm just referring, let's go down. Into
Go down to this other unit, okay. 1132, we are in the, I'm gonna call it the records room off the back of 3D. And whenever you're ready.
All right. Now, we was just upstairs, and we heard a noise we can't identify. So I'm looking to see if there's any spirits down here that made that noise. What I'd like you to do is I'll ask you some questions. If you cross these rods for yes, I'd appreciate it. Can you understand what I'm saying? It's starting, oh, both of them are crossing. All right, thank you. My name's Dan, so you know who you're talking to. There's a K2 on the floor, and you're setting off the K2, aren't you? Aren't you? All right. Dave, were you in the K2 also?
Yes.
Outstanding, and the rods are crossed. All right, I am curious who is down here. I know I'll never be able to come up with a name. Is there any electricity that would be causing that to?
That's what I'm
I was
checking now.
pointing it earlier and it wasn't.
Nothing?
I mean, we've been down here for baselines before. There is power in this room, but the baseline has been like this, so 0.0, that's why I'm still getting. There's somebody out here with me? If you made that noise, can you do it again? I'm hearing footsteps up in death row. Is there someone up in death row? That was interesting. So, as I took my phone out there, I heard a pop down the hallway further down in this unit. And as I was standing there calling out, as you heard me doing, I was hearing footsteps up above us.
Okay.
So, two different things.
Well, you left, the lights kept going off until you told us to be quiet, and then they stopped completely. Here, try to make those K2 meters, that's what's on the floor there. Try to make them go all the way to red. If you're from Chicago, you should be able to make those go all the way to red. Come on, you can do it. Okay, yes you can.
I'm not from Chicago.
All right. Is there somebody here from Chicago?
Sit.
Sit. Okay, I'm cool with that. I got stuff in my pocket, so it's hard for me to go any farther. All right, so I'm down here with you. Is that what you wanted? No? Let me ask you this one. Is there more than one spirit in this room with us? That's a big yes. The one of you who is from Missouri, are you from the east side of the state? Okay, and I'm going to ask this just for verification. Are you from the west side? Oh, I'd say that's a definite. All right. Sounds like you're proud of being from the west side.
From north south.
Country.